Hello and welcome to the vlog. This time, as in last time, we're clambering into the TARDIS and going back in time to the end of last year when I took the boat for a bit of a wash and brush up in the bilge area. This is my engine bay, and for the most part it was in decent condition. But down there, on the far side, under the batteries and all that pipework, lay a nasty mess of rust on the base plate. Yep, under that metal is the canal, and although the metal's 10mm thick, the surface had some nasty rusting due to water lying in the bilge when the previous owners had the boat. I dried it out as soon as I bought it 2 years ago, but it really needed proper treatment, and now was the time to take action. The plan was to pry off those rusted layers of metal, treat what was left, and give it a jolly good repaint. There was just one tiny snag: access. The rusty bit is the most inaccessible section of the engine bilge. You could poke a stick at it, but really the engine needed to come out. Elsewhere, such as under the stern gland, it wasn't too bad. Yes, the paintwork had come away in part, but the muck and oil down there has generally stopped the metal from rusting. It could certainly do with a clean-up though, even if only to remove the muck, but ideally a repaint. Right under the engine, the paintwork was pretty good, partly due to water not getting in there, as it's a separate compartment, and also probably due to the many engine oil leaks, which will have prevented air from getting to the metal. I don't like the oil leaks though, and you can see some of it there at the front of the engine bay, so it would be nice to clean those up and maybe diagnose the problems too. The paint's all been flaking off the engine as well, and I wanted that cleaned. More oil down the side of the engine, and something is spraying a mist of oil, I think, because look how filthy these supposedly yellow pipes are. There's this fine coating of oil mist on everything in the engine bay. There's one more compartment down there under this floorboard, and it's very easy to access with this lift-up panel. Inevitably, being the one bit I could easily get to, it was in excellent condition and only needed a bit of repainting. Why couldn't the rusty part be this easy to get to, eh? I was going to treat the metal with Vactan rust converter, and also bought a tin of primer suitable to paint straight onto the Vactan, plus some bilge paint that'll go onto the primer. To get things started, I mopped out as much oil as I could. This is the normal state of the engine room, a bit full, and it had to be emptied totally to get the engine out. Engineer Colin disconnected the pipework for the engine and the gearbox coolant, as well as the engine's electrical control circuits. That left a load of oil, coolant and diesel dribbling underneath. I scooped that lot out later. The 4 engine mounting bolts were unscrewed, and outside I'd moored the boat next to this hydraulic crane thing which would lift the engine out. Thankfully, it is set into the ground quite firmly. Colin doesn't like being filmed, but here he is bringing in the chains to strap onto the engine. And gradually the slack was taken up. This is quite a tense moment. Up it went, inch by inch, as Colin wound the ratchet. Once out, the engine bay looked very empty, apart from that pool of dumped fluids. I'd be bailing those out before any work could begin. Those pipes were still in the way, but now I could reach that corner. The idea now is that I will grovel around in this filthy bilge armed with plenty of kitchen towel, wipe up all the mess, give it a good degreasing, treat the rusty bits with derust treatment, prime, top coat, and hopefully in a few days have a pristine bilge again. After a lot of scooping out and mopping, the area under the engine began to get drier and cleaner. This was the first chance I'd had to properly see how things looked directly under the engine, and it was pretty good. Fear not, all the muck was scooped into containers for proper disposal, not chucked in the canal. By kneeling where the engine had been, I could now have a better look at that rusty section on the port side. It's not pretty, is it? Both the plate and the join with the vertical side. That was reassuring. Just great big chunks off the bottom of my boat peeling off. The only comfort was that rust tends to be a lot thicker than the metal it sprang from, so this should be less than it looks coming off the base plate. And look at the size of this piece. It just lifted up easy as pie. All rotten, soggy metal. Bear in mind that the canal was under there, the boat was still in the water. I was tapping somewhat nervously to see how solid it felt, and worried that at any point my finger might go through. It was time to get this party started with the tools assembled. This may look a tad awkward still, but compared to having the engine in, it was easy, and I started scraping away at the loose rust. Let me just remind you once more, this rusting base plate is what was holding the water out of my home. You can see just how soggy the rust is, and that's after I've kept the bilge free of water for 2 years, barring the odd splash every now and again, which I'd always dried. It had just soaked in there and turned into a muddy yuck. A somewhat alarming pile began to accumulate. A much better story in the back bilge under the stern gear. As expected, this was mostly just muck, not rust. Gradually the bits of oily leaves and debris were collated and removed until it looked like this. Much better. On the starboard side, I just had to scrape off any remaining loose paint. It wasn't rusty at all. And the engine bilge was given a good clean too. After a lot of scraping down to as good a metal base as I could, this was what the worst bit looked like and was now ready for treatment. I think I've done as much derusting and scraping out of muck and scraping off of old paint as I sensibly can do, at least for the moment. So the next job is to degrease everything, get rid of, oil and muck and dirt that's just stuck in all the cracks and crevices. For that I'm turning to something that was originally on a vlog about 18 months ago, I think. It's this gunk green degreasant, and I did buy it for the purpose of doing the bilge, and it's been sitting in a cupboard ever since I had it. But now the time has come to use it. You just brush it in, work it in well to all the greasy spots, give it a few minutes, and then rinse off. So that is my next task. Good morning. It's the next day. I didn't in fact start doing the degreasing last night because it was just getting a bit late, so I've left it overnight. What I'm about to do is vacuum round the engine bay, get rid of any little bits of rust and dust and muck and scraped off paint. Then I will do the degreasing, and you just rub the degreaser in and wait a few minutes. Rinse it. I'll probably rinse it twice. Bail out all the water from the bilge, dry it all off thoroughly, then apply the de-rust treatment to all the rusty bits and any bare metal bits, and then that has to wait 24 hours before I can then put a primer coat on. Hands up, who else vacuums their bilge? A bit of gunk in the pot and I was ready to squat in the engine bay again to paint on the degreaser. The entire rear bilge was duly soaked in the stuff. And once it had a chance to work, I sluiced it all out with a lot of water and a lot of scrubbing, once again making sure the waste was put into containers for disposal. Right, I have just dried the whole of the engine bilge using around, I'd say, 1,000 kitchen paper towels, and it's still a tiny bit damp, so what I'm going to do
is put the speicher unit on, the diesel heater, and that will heat up hot water, which will A, give me hot water for a shower because I'm a bit sticky and grimy, and B, it will make the whole engine room very, very warm, so hopefully that will dry it out. You can apparently apply the derust stuff to damp metal, but I'd rather have it dry if I can, and then I can give it one final vacuum, get rid of any bits of paper towel, all that, and any final bits of rust that are coming off. So dry it with the speicher, and then hoover it again, and then put the derusting stuff on, and then that's it for 24 hours. The speicher is now switching itself off. That's the little whining noise you can probably hear. So now I've got brushes out and it's time to apply the Vactan rust treatment.
This is the stuff. You just brush it on and wait, and then you can paint straight on top of it apparently. One bilge covered in de-ruster fluid and all looking a bit purple. As I recall, it's supposed to go a different colour when it's done its work. As you can see, I made sure a goodly amount was spread in that worst corner. The stuff likes to be warm to work, and as this was late October, the bilge was getting very chilly at night, so I put a hairdryer in there to warm things up, held in place with my favourite accessory, the lump hammer. By the next morning, it was clearly dry.
It's now 22 hours since the derusting treatment went on. It seems to have cured as far as you can tell. Certainly heating it up with hot air from the hairdryer seems to have helped it along. So I'm going to put the primer coat of paint on.
The primer pot is full of dire warnings about not breathing it in, so I opened all the back up as well as the front doors so a breeze could blow through the boat.
Luke, I am your father.
Now for some primer, which I put on every bit that had gone back to bare metal. Particularly under the engine where the paint was sound, I didn't treat or reprime it because there was no point scraping through decent paint. Ta-da! Looking better already, I think. Wow! What a transformation! It was so gleamy, and this was just after one coat of top coat. I barely wanted to put the engine back in, it looked so nice. I loved it so much I wanted to stroke it and cuddle it and have its children. Sorry, where was I? I didn't paint up the edges, as you can see, because although filthy, that paint was sound with no rust, so I just did a little border of new paint.
This has not been an entirely stress-free experience. After the second coat of paint, I came into the engine room one morning to find a very poor, unfortunate spider stuck in the paint, and the paint had dried enough that I couldn't free him. His little legs were trapped, and the only humane thing to do was kill him there and then. And that also, of course, made a little mucky mark in the paintwork as well, which I wasn't best pleased about, and I'm fairly sure the spider wasn't best pleased either. Worse than that, after the third coat had gone on, I discovered that one of the fuel pipes, even though I'd mopped it and I was pretty much certain I'd got any dribbles of fuel out, clearly I hadn't, because overnight while the paint was drying, the fuel pipe had dribbled diesel onto my wet paint, and of course it mixed with the wet paint, stopped it drying. I tried to mop it up, but all I did was smear the diesel into the wet paint, and then I had to try and mop that out and quickly slap some more paint on, but there wasn't time to properly take it back and degrease, which of course you really need to do first, and then put a primer on and 2 more coats of top coat, because they need 24 hours to properly dry between each coat. And I'm not here in this wharf for that long. Firstly, I've got an appointment to take the boat to Yelvertoft for blacking. Secondly, the engine is scheduled to go back in today. And thirdly, every night I stay here, it's costing me money. So there simply wasn't the option to say, all right, let's put everything back by a week. I'll stay here another week while I fix that diesel mess. And it's annoying, but, you know, what can you do? I've done my best. And well, I suppose I could have rescheduled the blacking and everything, but it would have been a major palaver, and it would have been a major nuisance. So I'm just going to have to live with it and hope that it's better than it was, and that the bit that was really rusty, let's hope that is better than it was. Anyway, engine back in today.
Here's Colin's glamorous assistant watching as he degreased the engine, partly to make it clean and also with an eye to tracking down the sources of my oil leaks. With the aid of a pressure washer and having wrapped up all the pipe holes and electrics, it got a good soaking. Immediately after this, Colin spotted one likely oil leak, this seal on the side of one of the cylinders, and this was a problem.
The only proper way to fix that would be to take the entire top of the engine apart, pull those push rod connector thingies out and put a new seal in its place, which would be an absolute beast of a job and cost me many hundreds of pounds. So instead we're trying a more improvised solution with some super sealant stuff stuck down the hole instead, and we'll see how I get on with that.
That done, it was time to pick the engine up again, swing it over the stern and lower it back into place. Yelvertoft was calling, and once the engine was all reconnected, I would be on my way. That's it for this vlog. Thanks for watching. Goodbye.